to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome and settle in with Deep Sleep Stories, where the day can loosen its grip and your mind can drift into gentler places. Tonight, you'll be carried into a quiet village after rainfall, where moonlight and soft magic make the puddles shimmer like secret windows to peaceful worlds. Let your body find the position that feels most supported. Allow your shoulders to drop, your jaw to unclench, your hands to rest without holding anything at all. If it feels comfortable, soften your gaze or let your eyes close completely. Notice the simple truth of this moment. You are here and you are safe, and you do not have to do anything. Breathe in slowly, as though you're sipping warm air. Let the breath fill you, not with effort, but with ease. Then breathe out in a long, unhurried release, as though the exhale is a quiet permission to let go. Again, a gentle inhale, and a softer, longer exhale. You might imagine that each breath gathers up the loose threads of the day, worry, noise, planning, remembering, and sets them down beside you neatly where they can wait until morning. Tonight belongs to rest. Tonight belongs to slow, calm drifting. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a narrow lane after a rain. The air is cool and clean, brushed smooth by the weather. The world glows with that special hush that comes when clouds have wandered off and the sky has cleared its throat. Somewhere a final drop falls from a leaf with a tiny sound. Quiet applause for the storm that has passed. You take one more slow breath, and as you exhale, the scene begins to unfold on its own, as if it has been waiting patiently for you to arrive. And now, without any need for you to follow too closely, the story gently shifts, like a boat turning toward deeper water. In a small village tucked between meadow and woodland, there was a night when the rain stopped suddenly, as if it had remembered an appointment elsewhere. The village had a way of keeping its peace. It was not famous for anything in particular, and perhaps that was its secret. It did not strain to be seen. It simply existed. Soft-roofed cottages clustered like sleeping cats, gardens bordered by low stone walls, and narrow paths worn smooth by unhurried footsteps. The people here spoke gently, laughed quietly, and went about their days with the steady rhythm of those who know the value of calm. Beyond the last cottage, the land dipped into a shallow valley where a stream braided through the grass. On clear mornings, sunlight scattered on its surface. On windy afternoons, it sang in little ripples. On rainy nights, it widened into a lacework of puddles and pools, collecting moonlight in patient bowls. The rain that evening had come in slow, generous sheets. It drummed on shutters and chimneys, filled the gutters with bright, quick streams, and made the world smell like dark soil and clean stone. When it ended, the clouds slid away as if drawn by unseen hands, revealing a sky so clear it felt newly polished. And that was when the puddles began to shimmer. Not all at once, and not in any loud or startling way. There were no flashes like lightning, no bursts of unnatural color. The shimmer was subtle, like the flicker at the edge of a candle flame. A delicate, quiet radiance moved across the rainwater, gathered in ruts and hollows, as though starlight had decided to take a closer look at the ground. Most villagers were already tucked into their beds. Doors were latched, lamps were dimmed, and quilts were pulled up to chins. The village from a distance looked like a handful of warm embers in a cool, dark field. But one person was still awake. Her name was Elowen, and she lived in a cottage near the edge of the meadow where the path turned toward the woods. Elowen was a keeper of small things. Not important things, not grand things, small things. She tended a patch of herbs behind her cottage, filled bowls for the birds, and mended torn cloth with patient stitches. She knew the names of the trees and the habits of the weather. She could tell by the smell of wind whether the next day would be bright or gray. Elowen was also the village lamplighter, though lamplighter made it sound more dramatic than it was. The village had only a few lanterns set along the main lane, simple glass and tin ones that offered a warm glow to guide late walkers home. Each evening, Elowen made her slow circuit, lifting each latch, coaxing flame from wick, making sure the night would not be too dark for anyone who needed a little light. Tonight, the rain had interrupted her usual routine. She'd waited under her porch, listening to the steady pour and watching the water run down the road in shining ribbons. When the rain finally stopped, she took her small lantern, one she carried for herself, and stepped outside. The air was cool enough to make her breathe a little deeper. The meadow beyond her cottage held the scent of damp grass. The last drops clung to the world, trembling on blades and petals, reflecting faint silver. She walked toward the lane, her boots pressing gently into the softened earth. Her lantern swayed at her side, its light warm and honeyed. It traced the edges of stones and roots. It made the wet leaves gleam like polished green glass. And then Elowen noticed it. A puddle lay in the middle of the lane, filling a shallow dip between stones. It should have looked ordinary. Dark water, a smooth surface, perhaps the reflection of the sky. Yet this puddle held something more. It seemed to glow from within, not brightly, but with a soft, steady shimmer that rose and fell as if it were breathing. Elowen paused, not from fear, but from the kind of wonder that makes you stop without thinking. The puddle's surface reflected the stars above, and that made sense, but it also reflected something else. When Elowen leaned closer, she saw a faint image of a place she did not recognize. A narrow footbridge arched over a stream, lit by lanterns that looked like tiny moons. The scene was so delicate, so perfectly still, that it seemed less like a reflection and more like a memory held in water. Elowen's lantern light did not disturb it. The puddle continued to shimmer, calm and inviting, as if it had been waiting for her eyes to meet it. She straightened slowly and looked around. Other puddles dotted the lane, the meadow path, and the edges of the village square. Some were small as a saucer. Some were wide enough to catch a whole slice of sky. And now that she was paying attention, she could see that they were shimmering too, each with its own faint, shifting glow. Elowen felt the night open, like a book turning to a secret page. She took a careful step toward the next puddle. It lay near the base of a stone wall, collecting rainwater that dripped from ivy. Its shimmer was softer, almost shy. In its surface, Elowen saw a field of tall grass moving in a slow breeze, though the real meadow around her was still. In the watery image, fireflies drifted like floating seeds of light. A third puddle reflected a quiet sea under moonlight, waves folding and unfolding without sound. A fourth held the image of a snowy path lined with bare trees, each branch dressed in silver frost. Elowen's heart felt gentle and steady. The images did not call to her like a command. They did not tug or pull. They simply offered themselves, as calm as clouds. She turned her gaze upward toward the sky. The moon was round and patient, bright enough to paint pale shadows on the ground. The stars were scattered like a handful of sugar tossed across velvet. Everything above looked ordinary, and yet everything below had become quietly extraordinary. Elowen continued along the lane, her lantern swinging softly. She lit the first village lantern with practiced ease. The flame caught, steady and reassuring. The glass warmed from within, and the lane gained a little more comfort. Then she lit the second lantern and the third. As she walked, she noticed something else. The puddles did not shimmer in the lantern light alone. Their glow seemed to answer the village lanterns, as if enjoying the company of light. The shimmer deepened when the lanterns were lit, as though the puddles were waking more fully into themselves. Near the village square, Elowen found the largest puddle of all. Rainwater had gathered there in a wide, smooth mirror, filling the shallow bowl of the cobblestones. It lay beneath an old oak that stood in the center of the square, its branches reaching outward like the arms of a kindly giant. Elowen approached slowly. The shimmer here was more pronounced, a silvery dance that moved across the surface in gentle patterns. When she leaned over, she did not see a bridge or a field or a sea. She saw the square itself, only different. In the puddle's reflection, the oak's leaves were lit from within. The lanterns around the square glowed brighter, their light like warm pearls. And between the cobblestones, tiny flowers had bloomed, small pale blossoms that opened like yawns and swayed as if to music. In that reflected square, the village looked as though it belonged to a softer world, one where everything was touched by a quiet enchantment. Elowen watched, breathing slowly, and felt a strange comfort settle over her. It was not the thrill of discovery. It was the soothing sense that the world held more kindness than she often remembered, more wonder than she usually had time to notice. As she stood there, the shimmer changed. A faint ripple moved across the puddle, not caused by wind, not caused by her breath. It was as though something inside the water had turned, like a sleeper shifting in bed. The reflection in the puddle brightened slightly, and a small figure appeared at the edge of the watery image. It was hard to say what the figure was. It was no larger than Elowen's hand in the reflection, and it seemed to be made of moonlight and mist. It wore something like a cloak, though the cloak was more like a suggestion of fabric than fabric itself. Its face was not sharp or detailed, but Elowen could sense a gentle curiosity in it, like the feeling of being watched by a friendly animal. The figure lifted one shimmering hand and waved. Elowen's lips parted in a small, silent smile. She did not speak because it felt like a night for quiet. Instead, she lifted her own hand and returned the wave, slowly, as if not to startle the delicate moment. The small figure seemed pleased. It stepped closer to the puddle's edge in the reflection and pointed toward the center of the shimmering water. Elowen leaned in a little more. In the center of the puddle, the shimmer thickened, gathering itself into a brighter pool of light. The surface looked suddenly deeper, as though the puddle had become a doorway, rather than a shallow collection of rain. Elowen's lantern light trembled slightly in her hand, not from fear, but from the way wonder makes the body forget its usual steadiness. The small figure pointed again, and this time Elowen understood. Without needing words, the puddle was offering a path. Not a path for her feet, but a path for her attention, her imagination, her drifting mind. The village square was quiet. No one else was there. The oak stood watchful and calm. The lanterns glowed. The night seemed to hold its breath, not in tension, but in tender patience. Elowen sat down on the edge of the low stone bench beneath the oak. She placed her lantern beside her where it cast a warm circle on the cobblestones. Then she turned her full attention to the puddle. The shimmer welcomed her gaze, like soft hands. At first, she simply watched. She let the silver patterns move, let the reflected flowers sway, let the glow settle into her eyes and soothe her thoughts. The small figure remained near the edge, as if standing guard at a gentle gate. Slowly, Elowen felt the edges of her awareness soften. The day's leftover thoughts, chores, errands, small worries, began to loosen, sliding away like water off a leaf. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. The puddle's surface deepened. In the shimmering water, the reflected square began to change. The cobblestones stretched into a path of smooth, pale stones. The oak's branches arched overhead, becoming an avenue of trees with leaves like thin silver coins. The lanterns multiplied, lining the path and glowing with a calm, amber light. Elowen's eyes followed the path as it led away from the familiar square into a place that felt like the village's dream of itself. The small figure stepped onto the path and beckoned. It moved with a lightness that reminded Elowen of a moth drifting near a lamp. Elowen did not move her body. She remained seated beneath the oak. But inside her, inside that quiet place where thoughts turn into images, she felt herself begin to follow. It was like stepping into a memory she had never lived. The path in the puddle world was cool beneath imaginary feet. The air carried the scent of rain and distant blossoms. The lanterns hummed softly, not with sound, but with presence. Their light did not glare or demand attention. It simply made everything gentle and visible. As Elowen drifted along the path, she noticed puddles here too. They lay between stones, gathered at the roots of trees, nestled in little hollows of earth, and each one shimmered with its own quiet radiance. The small figure paused beside one of these puddles and gestured. Elowen leaned closer, with her mind, with her attention. In that puddle she saw a meadow under morning sun. Dew clung to grass, and a light breeze moved the world in slow waves. A rabbit hopped lazily through the scene, leaving no trace. The small figure moved to another puddle. This one held the image of a warm kitchen where bread cooled on a wooden table. A kettle released a thin curl of steam, and somewhere in the room a cat slept, curled into itself like a comma. Another puddle showed a hillside at twilight where lavender grew in neat rows and the air was thick with its scent. Another showed a quiet library with tall shelves and soft chairs and a fire that crackled without hurry. Each puddle was a window to calm. Each shimmer was an invitation to rest. Elowen's mind moved from one image to the next, not grasping, not analyzing. She simply received them the way one receives warmth from a blanket. The scenes soothed her, not because they were exciting, but because they were safe and slow and whole. The path continued, winding gently through the silver trees. Above the sky in this puddle world was a deeper shade of night, velvety and rich. The stars looked closer, as if they hung just beyond the leaves. Sometimes a star would drift slowly like a lantern floating on a river, and then settle again into stillness. The small figure moved with quiet assurance. It did not rush. It seemed to understand the pace that rest requires. Eventually the path led to a clearing. In the center of the clearing lay a pond, round and smooth, its surface glowing with a soft inner light. It was larger than any puddle, yet it held the same shimmering quality. The air around it felt cooler, as if the pond breathed out calm. Elowen stood at the pond's edge in her imagination, her attention hovering over the water. The small figure stepped onto the surface of the pond as if it were solid glass. It walked lightly, leaving no ripples. Halfway across, it turned and waited, as though inviting Elowen to come nearer. Elowen felt no fear. The pond's shimmer was kind. The clearing was quiet. The silver trees stood like guardians of peace. She leaned closer and the pond's surface changed, becoming more like a sky turned upside down. It held the stars, but it also held something else, an image of Elowen herself, sitting beneath the oak in the real village square, her lantern beside her, her face softened by wonder. Resting loosely in her lap, the image resting loosely in her lap. The image seemed to radiate a gentle warmth, as if the pond was showing her not just what she looked like, but what she could become when she allowed herself to rest. The small figure reached down and touched the pond's surface. A ripple spread outward, slow and smooth. As the ripple moved, the pond revealed other reflections, moments from Elowen's life, but softened like stones worn smooth by water. There was Elowen as a child, running through rain and laughing. There was Elowen in her herb garden, brushing lavender between her fingers. There was Elowen sharing tea with a neighbor by a window, listening to the wind. None of these reflections carried sharp edges. They did not demand anything from her. They were simply reminders of gentle moments gathered like little treasures. The ripple reached the pond's edge and faded. The small figure turned and walked back across the pond, returning to Elowen. It bowed its head slightly, as if offering a quiet blessing. Then it lifted its hand and pointed upward. Elowen followed the gesture and saw something hanging from the branches of the nearest silver tree. It looked like a droplet of water suspended in air without falling. It was larger than a raindrop, about the size of a plum, and it glowed faintly, shimmering like the puddles. Inside the droplet, tiny lights drifted like slow snow. The small figure reached up and plucked the droplet from the air, holding it gently between both hands. It offered the droplet to Elowen. Elowen accepted it, not with her physical hands beneath the oak, but with the hands of her imagination, with that part of her that could still believe in quiet magic. The droplet felt cool and soothing. Its shimmer was steady, like a lullaby without sound. When Elowen held it close, she felt her breathing deepen. She felt her thoughts slow even further, as if they were settling into a soft nest. The small figure gestured toward the path again, and Elowen understood. It was time to return, bringing the droplet's calm with her. Together they walked back through the clearing, along the pale stone path, beneath the silver leaves. The lanterns lining the way glowed softly, guiding them like patient stars. As they moved, the puddles along the path shimmered in quiet farewell. Their images, meadows, kitchens, hillsides, libraries, blurred gently like dreams, preparing to release their hold. Elowen did not cling. She simply let the calm remain, even as the details softened. The small figure led her back to the place where the path began, where the village square had first transformed. At the threshold, the figure paused. It lifted one hand in a final wave, and in that gesture, Elowen felt gratitude, wordless and warm. Then the figure stepped backward, fading into the shimmer, becoming part of the water's gentle light. Elowen's awareness drifted back like a feather settling onto still air. In the real village square, beneath the oak, Elowen sat quietly on the stone bench. The puddle before her still shimmered, though the reflected path and silver trees had softened into a simple glow. The lantern beside her cast warm light on the cobblestones. The village lanterns around the square glowed steadily, keeping the night kind. Elowen looked down at her hands. In her palm, there was nothing physical, no glowing droplet, no magic trinket. Yet she could feel it all the same. A cool, steady calm nestled in her chest like a small lake of peace. She smiled very faintly and let her eyelids lower for a moment. The night was quiet. The world was wet and clean. Somewhere in the meadow, a night bird shifted on its branch. Somewhere near the stream, water moved softly over stones. Elowen stood unhurriedly and lifted her lantern. There were still a few village lanterns to light, and she wanted the lane to be welcoming for anyone who might be late returning home. She moved through the square with slow steps, her boots making soft sounds on the damp ground. As she walked, she noticed that the shimmering puddles were not only in the square. They were everywhere the rain had gathered, along the lane, beside doorsteps, beneath hedges, at the edge of the meadow path. Each puddle held its own quiet glow. Elowen began to see a pattern. The puddles closest to cottage doors shimmered with images of warm, peaceful rooms, firesides, quilts, steaming cups, sleepy cats. The puddles along the meadow path shimmered with images of open fields and drifting clouds and slow-moving animals. The puddles nearer the woods shimmered with deeper, quieter scenes, moonlit clearings, gentle fog, ancient trees, breathing in the dark. It was as if the puddles were reflecting not the world as it was, but the world as it wished to comfort those who looked. Elowen paused near a cottage where a small garden gate stood slightly open. She gently closed it, the latch clicking softly. A simple kindness, a small act of care. Then she looked down at a puddle near the gate. In it she saw a child sleeping peacefully, hair spread across a pillow like a dark fan. The image made Elowen's heart soften. She did not know whose child it was, and perhaps it did not matter. The puddle was showing her what the night was doing, protecting rest. She moved on, lighting lanterns one by one. Each flame caught easily, as though the night itself wished to be illuminated in warm, gentle ways. The glass warmed, the light steadied, and the lane became a ribbon of comfort. As Elowen walked, she noticed something else. The shimmering puddles seemed to brighten briefly whenever she lit a lantern nearby. The puddles and lanterns were in quiet conversation, exchanging light like friendly neighbors sharing a smile. The lane curved toward the meadow where the path dipped, and the ground held more puddles than stones. The rain had pooled there in countless small mirrors. In the moonlight, the meadow looked like it was sprinkled with silver coins. Elowen stepped onto the path. Her lantern held a little higher. The grass on either side was dark and heavy with water. A faint mist hovered low to the ground, not thick enough to obscure, only enough to soften the edges of things. The night felt like velvet, cool and gentle against skin. Elowen walked slowly, enjoying the way the air tasted clean. At a shallow dip in the path, she came to a cluster of puddles gathered together like a constellation on the ground. Each one shimmered. When she looked into the first puddle, she saw a distant mountain under a pale dawn. The peak was dusted with snow, and clouds drifted lazily around it. In the second puddle, she saw a quiet lake at sunset, the water painted with soft pink and gold. In the third, she saw a narrow woodland trail where lantern mushrooms glowed along the edges, lighting the way without any heat. Elowen's lantern light fell across the puddles, and for a moment their shimmers seemed to synchronize, as though all the little windows were breathing together. Elowen sat down on a flat stone beside the path. She did not feel tired in a heavy way. She felt tired in a natural way, the way the earth feels tired after rain, ready to settle, ready to rest. She let her lantern rest on the stone beside her, and she folded her hands in her lap. The puddles shimmered quietly, their images changing slowly like clouds drifting across a sky. None of the images were sharp or demanding. They were all gentle scenes, a nest tucked into branches, a warm bakery at dawn, a slow river under starlight, a quiet room filled with books. Elowen's breathing matched the slow rhythm of the images. Inhale and exhale, inhale and exhale. As she watched, she noticed that one puddle, slightly larger than the others, held a different kind of shimmer. Its light was softer, deeper, almost like moonlight filtered through water. Elowen leaned closer. In the puddle, she saw the meadow itself, but not as it looked now. In the watery image, the meadow was filled with tiny lights, drifting just above the grass like fireflies, though the real meadow had none. The lights moved slowly, lazily, in no particular pattern, as though they were simply enjoying being awake. Then, in the reflection, one of the tiny lights drifted toward the puddle's edge and seemed to look back at Elowen. Elowen smiled again, small and calm. The light in the puddle lifted slightly as though in greeting, and then drifted away to rejoin the others. Elowen understood, without needing words, that the shimmering was not meant to pull her away from her life. It was meant to remind her that her life was already part of something gentle and magical, even in ordinary moments, even in puddles on a muddy path, even in a village that was not famous for anything at all. She sat there for a while, letting the night hold her. When she finally stood, she did so slowly. She lifted her lantern, careful not to spill any wax. The flame inside burned steady and calm. She began walking back toward the village, her steps unhurried, her mind soft. The puddles continued to shimmer as she passed. Their images followed her gently, offering one last quiet comfort. A warm bed, a safe room, a peaceful morning, a friendly hearth. Elowen returned to the square beneath the oak. The largest puddle still shimmered there, though its glow now felt quieter, as if it were beginning to settle. The village around her slept. Curtains were drawn. Chimneys breathed out faint warmth. The lantern she had lit lined the lane with a soft, golden thread. Elowen carried her own lantern back to her cottage near the meadow's edge. The path to her door was damp, and her boots left dark prints that quickly softened behind her. Inside her cottage was simple and warm. A small table, a shelf of jars, a chair by the window. Elowen set her lantern down, closed the door gently, and stood for a moment in the quiet. She could still feel the cool calm of the imaginary droplet in her chest, steady and soothing. She washed her hands, the water cool and refreshing. She dried them slowly. She moved through her small evening routines with care, not rushing, not thinking too far ahead. Then she climbed into bed. Outside, the puddles shimmered in the moonlight, their soft glow fading and brightening like a slow lullaby. Inside, Elowen pulled her quilt up to her shoulders and let her eyes close. The night held her gently. Now, as the story begins to soften and slow, you can let your own breathing become even quieter. Imagine the shimmer of those puddles, small, peaceful windows catching moonlight, not bright, not loud, just a gentle glow that comforts the dark. Let your shoulders sink a little more. Let your hands rest heavier. Let your thoughts drift like tiny lights over a meadow, moving wherever they please. If any worries appear, picture them as raindrops that simply fall into a puddle and disappear, leaving only a soft ripple that fades into stillness. Inhale, calm. Exhale, release. The village is sleeping. The lanterns are steady. The puddles are quiet now, their shimmer becoming softer, slower, like a dream settling deeper into night. And you can do the same. Drift down, deeper, softer, as if you are being gently carried on a slow stream beneath a starry sky. Nothing to solve, nothing to do, only rest, only warmth, only quiet. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.